Well, good morning, good day, good afternoon, everyone. We're sitting here with a group of incredible men, and we just want to talk about fatherhood, manhood, what it is to walk with God through different stages of life. I'm here with Pastor Harrison from Kingdom Church, Pastor Dr. David McGrew, our spiritual advisor, and know everything for us. And so he'll fix anything that we don't say correctly today. Pastor Brett, I'm Jeremy, and we're just wanting to have a conversation of what it is to live as a man of God, lead your family, walk together in various stages of life.
Yeah, I think the idea of being a man after God's own heart is captivating for me. I think about, obviously, that's in reference to David. David wasn't perfect, but he walked in humility, walked in repentance, but loved to worship, loved the presence of God, and was above all else described and defined as obedient. And God spoke, he moved, he listened. And then was a dad who went through incredible challenges in terms of, he's got a son who betrays him deeply, stabs him in the back, steals the kingdom. His mentor, King Saul, I don't, mentor is probably a very generous term for what Saul was. Father-in-law, though, also tries to kill him. So how do you be a guy that everybody wants to kill, but you keep clean hands and a pure heart? Again, made mistakes along the way, but as you made mistakes along the way, I think about Psalm 51, restore to me the joy of my salvation. He wants clean hands and a pure heart. He's repentant before the Lord. So yeah, the idea of being a man after God's own heart, what does that look like? Let's start there. What does it look like to be a man after God's own heart? Pastor Harrison, you're leading a great church. You've got 4 kids. Life is popping. It never stops. But when I say be a man after God's own heart, what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you?
Mhm. Well, as you were talking about like David and Absalom, I think what just kind of struck me was thinking about fatherhood and sonship and sort of how there's like this unbreakable sort of cycle between the two. Meaning, like, I think what came to my mind was like, if I want to be a great father, I need to first be a great son. And so if I want to be after God's own heart, I think a lot of times we can ascribe that to be like, I need to be more like Jesus, I need to be more like God. And I don't think that isn't true, but I think what comes to my mind is like, hey, I want to be a great son first. And that's like, especially, the season that we're in with kids and church and ministry. That's been the thing that the Lord's been speaking to me is like, hey, if you want to be a great father, you need to first learn to be a great son, because one of like, and we'll probably get into the roles of a father and what that means and to be a man, and all those are great, but I think to me they're an outflow of what you are able to first receive as a son. And I think as God teaches us as sons to like, what does it look like when the father provides for us, when the father protects for us, so on and so forth, then I can live that out as a son and then one day as a father. So that's kind of the first thing, like to be after God's own heart. Like first I need to be like I need to receive his heart as a son.
Wow.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very
Very good. This is
we're,
very good.
we're enamored here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But
Wow.
I
Can
think,
I write this down?
yeah, I think that's one thing where a lot of men, I would say in our generation, but I guess we're kind of
Multi-generational.
multi-generational here. Uh, there are a lot of men that don't know how to receive anything from another man in a healthy way, without having to prove themselves or be enough or be good enough. And it's not that you set aside responsibilities, drive, a lot of things that, I'll tell my wife, when I'm hard on my boys sometimes, it's like, well, I refuse to let them grow up to be useless contributors, lacking contributors to society. Like, there's something that they need to learn and be taught, but they also need to learn that they have someone they can come to, they can receive from, like you're saying. But um, I was very fortunate. My dad is amazing, has always been present, but in my extended family, we were the exception, not the rule. And I think there's a lot of men that they're trying to serve God, follow him, but they never had that example. or the ability to receive from anyone. And I don't know how. So how do we lead them to learn to, okay, receive from God as a good father, but you've never experienced it in your humanity?
I think Harrison's point, joined with yours, Jeremy, is uh, underneath it all, supporting it, is the idea that they have to be encouraged and even taught how to pursue and have a relationship with the Lord. Because I too thought when Harrison was talking that, in particular, my generation, us fellows were tended to be raised by men who fought the Second World War, and though they might have been present in the building, they weren't necessarily present in the moment. They had shut down their feelings, and so there was not a lot of middle ground about how you process feelings, about how you learn to think, how you mature. It was just you either did right or you did wrong, and there was a consequence either way. So it comes back down to, I think, in our context, being able to not just tell men what it's like to have a relationship with the Lord, but lead them into that place where they can experience God themselves, because it is that confidence in that relationship that I think is the root seedbed, perhaps, for the other relationships.
So, in the context of, you know, fatherhood, it's Father's Day. Um, we're celebrating that biblical fatherhood. We have to challenge, sons, raise them up. I also think of, the husband side of like, to be a father, your first husband. And when I think about the passage in Ephesians where every man loves to quote, and she'll be in submission to me, we often forget the first part that talks about mutual submission, and then the next part that says, and the man should lay down his life as Christ laid down his life for the church. Maybe Pastor David, you could start, but this idea of laying our lives down for our wives, for our family, for our kids, it's not just about, it's not about being served. It is ultimately about serving and leading through serving.
You covered that really well, because it concludes with this rather glib, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. So we often think that if we look at marriage, we can kind of get an idea of what Jesus and the church's relationship is supposed to be. But the truth is that marriage and family show us what the relationship of God already is. And so we go back to that to find out how to be a man, how to be a husband, how to be a father. And you're right, they're all learned in a certain progression. We haven't really talked about the manhood aspect of it yet, but that's probably the core of being a good dad, being a good husband, being a good friend, being a good mentor, being a good son. It comes back down to understanding what the essence of manhood is and what God requires out of it. So uh, there's more to it, of course, than just having a relationship with the Lord, because that's got to flow out and touch other people in a sacrificial way, so that you are understanding that you're there to maintain the group cohesion, that people are feeding off of you, that they're shaping their identity, like it says in Hebrews, that we've got God who gives us our nature, gives us our behavior, gives us our inheritance. There's a lot of men today that don't have an inheritance, but it's because this relationship with the father idea is broken in their life. They don't know what it means to receive an inheritance. They're not really legitimate sons because they've not received discipline. So uh, you can't really pass discipline out righteously in a home to your children if you've never learned to receive it yourself. That's a good thing about being in church. That's a good thing about being pastor. We were talking about pastoring earlier, is that your prime role is to not flog them, of course, but it's to lead the people that you've got in your care. I've never seen a guy that was a good dad who couldn't be a good pastor in some setting, but I've never seen even a gifted, charismatic fellow who was not a good dad that you could trust to be a good pastor. Those two roles are very much connected. So I don't know that I touched it all, but it's about being that man that understands that his purpose for existing is to maintain the unity of that family committed to him and keep it whole and moving together, to protect it, to provide for it, to instruct it.
I'm wondering, when you talk about husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church, and learning to serve, and discipline flowing out of that. So one thing in my marriage, and love my wife. We've been married 21 years. We're so stinking codependent. It's not even funny.
I've been for
In a good
years.
way. In a good way.
I've been with my wife longer than I was alive without being with her, and I've never. And maybe I'm just like a bad, not a bad person, but I'm like, I've always thought this, like, I've never ever struggled to serve my wife. But then when my wife says, "Okay, but you can love me so well and you can serve me, but how do you serve your kids?" Because you want to discipline them, you want to teach them, you want them, like I said, I want them to know how to be the right thing, do the right thing, be respectful of people. But it's always lovely when your partner. I married a partner, not someone that just like, "Hey, you should listen to me." And so we have some fun conversations. But the challenging thing is when she says, "Hey, I think if you would serve your kids a little bit better, it would be easier to lead them in those things." And like sometimes as a dad, like, and maybe I'm just like, this is my human side coming out. I struggle to serve my kids the same way I would serve my wife, and I think there's a learning moment there, that there is a discipline area, but there is also a way that's like, man, God, like, do they see it's for their benefit? And how do I reflect that? Because I think that's, I don't know, maybe for me, but for most men, I don't know if that comes naturally to most men. We're not as nurturing as our wives are.
Mhm. I feel like, I mean, my kids are, I have 4 kids that are 5 years and under. So my kids are little, and I would just resonate with what you're saying. And I think what I find is hard for me, and maybe Pastor Dave can speak into this. Like a lot of, I feel like a lot of serving my kids, it's like I have to have the long goal in mind because there isn't a whole lot of immediate gratification, like for a 2-year-old, in terms of teaching discipline. Whereas, like when I'm talking to my wife or pastoring our church, and you have a great conversation, people will thank you, and you feel that your kids don't often thank you after a discipline. So I have to, like, and I'm not, and I think you're right in the sense for I feel like as women, and we honor you that there is like that natural thing that it just comes for us, where for us as men it's almost a learnt thing, and like I have to discipline myself to believe that I'm just raising, like what I'm doing now is for the future, and it's sowing seeds for later. And that's, I mean, at least that's a part of how I kind of do it, because I'm easily drawn to the immediate gratification of who can I minister to that will praise me right away or thank me right away, or I'll see fruit right away.
And I think that's why, like, you see a lot of pastors, like, and I'm so grateful. My kids are from 18 to 2 years old, and the thing Brandy and I are most grateful is that our teenagers and our young adult daughter, like, they want to be in the house of God. They want to be around God's people, and to me, growing up, I knew so many friends, pastors, that they loved serving other people and their families were left behind. And now we have this disconnect of another generation saying, like, well, you loved the accolades, the affirmation, the thanks from people, but you couldn't love me just for being a son or a daughter. And I think that's a dangerous place for leaders especially to walk.
Yeah. And I I think when we're thinking about the family, like, it's such a beautiful and important thing. It's the first institution that ever existed before there's governmental structures, before there's church. As we understand it, there was family. And so it's important to the heart of God. And I think that as we go on this journey of following Jesus and serving his house, that we have to determine that we're doing this together. Like, we're going to do this as a family. We're going to do this as a unit, and that we can participate in these things. And it's as simple and as challenging as having conversations along the way. We had over and above offering a little while ago, and we had a family conversation about, okay, so we're gonna give this as a family. And then our boys are 10 and 12. What are you each gonna give? and then Des was really quick also just be like, listen, we're not putting you any under pressure to give. We're just asking. We're talking about this as a family. You know, we choose to do this. We choose to serve as a team together. That's why, you know, we serve, our whole family serves at like Night to Shine or Fall Festival or all these different events that we do at the church. Like we all are in this together. How can we do this together and not all go our separate ways? Because I think the modern family lives under the same roof, sleeps under the same roof, but lives entirely apart. We have so many activities, we have so many things, and I'm not saying don't do the thing. I'm just saying being mindful of what are we doing together? And it's going to look different in each situation. I think about Gideon and the moment that he has with the angel of the Lord, which, you know, I'm going to say it's Christophany, Judges 6. I'm
Just throw that in
just
there.
throwing it in there.
Yeah.
That's what I think it is. And that's my opinion, but the theologian residents will correct it if I'm wrong.
No, I
But
think it's good. It's a good, solid position.
so he's having this conversation in theory with Jesus, who says, hey, you're a mighty warrior. He starts calling these things out. Jesus being the one who handcrafted, created him. Now, you know, reference Ephesians 2:10, Gideon being his masterpiece. He's looking at his masterpiece, calling out all the elements as if they are. And the first thing that Gideon says is, no, I'm the smallest, I'm the weakest, I'm from the smallest tribe. And as I read that, I can't help but think that Gideon didn't have those thoughts on his own, that somebody said that. That he's saying something that somebody else said, and probably somebody else of significance in his life. And we think about, you know, Proverbs and James, the book of James, accentuate there's death and life in the power of the tongue. What am I saying over in my case, my sons, over my children as a father that is shaping identity? Because in those offhanded moments that just happen, I wonder how much of that is getting into their hearts.
Exactly.
What works? I mean, we're all in different stages. What have you found helpful? What have you found beneficial when it comes into the area of speaking life? Because it's different at each stage. Because I want my boys to face the world. I want them to be prepared for that. I want them to be prepared for the good times and the bad. But I want them to have a sense of identity and calling and purpose over their lives.
That's good. The word families come up enough that it reminds me that it's only been like in the last 200 years, 150 years that it meant in our Western culture, it meant that the people that actually lived under your roof and were your blood. It's akin to the word familiar, and that's why church is a family. That's why God's restoring family. That what his main focus is to reclaim the family of humanity. So coming back to what Harrison said, I think you start with accepting the fact that you probably know your kids better than they know themselves. It's certainly you do at certain seasons of life, and being familiar with them. Being familiar, number one, because you're watching them as an adult. Number two, because other than being 2 and 3 years old and toddlers and such, you can remember what it was like to be 10. You remember what it was like to be 18 and in grade 8, and those things. So in that familiarity, you can be the bridge between what they're feeling and what they're thinking, and you see the potential that they've got and help them to understand that somebody does believe in them, that they do have potential, that serving them is not just correcting them, discipline's not just correcting them, but it's not just making them say, don't think the wrong thing, but think the right thing, so they can have this vision forming in their heart that they can not yet put words to about what their potential in life could be. That's the greatest service you can ever do is see. That's why intuitively we all want our kids to grow up and we'll say, go farther than we did. That's what we're saying, is that you tapped into more of the potential that's on the inside of you than we did.
It's scary though, because like you said, you see things in your kids, and it's kind of funny when I see attitudes that my kids have that kind of come from their mother, and they struggle. You chuckle.
cut
But
that
when
part
you
out.
see something in them and you're like, "Oh God, it took me years to think right about that in my own life. How do I speak to shape it now?" Like, because like I watch my kids, I'm like, I don't want them to struggle with some of the things that took me to my 30s to figure out. No, God's bigger than that, or we gotta adjust some things, and so it's scary, but that's your job to start speaking into that and saying, no, this is how God can shape this. This is how, you see this anxiousness in your heart or this negative self-talk. Like, I've had conversations with some of my kids. You need to stop long enough to listen to what God is saying about you or what other people are saying about you before you say these things about yourself. And but it takes a lot of work sometimes.
I love the idea that the angel of the Lord, Jesus, one of the two, or the same. I love
That's
that.
solid too.
Yeah, he's speaking prophetically over Gideon to say that this is who you are. And a lot of times, like when we see in scripture when people speak prophetically, it's not even so much telling the future as much as it's speaking the thing that already exists inside. You hit on it already that God created Gideon, and so He knows what's inside of him, and I think that's true for all of us as men, but even as sons and daughters. Like, God knows what's inside of us, and so our job, I think, as parents is to call out that which God put inside of our kids and or the people that God has given us influence. And so we want to, be prophetic parents, my wife and I, and so we want to prophesy over our kids. And it's not even always specifically hearing a word from the Lord, but sometimes it's hearing the word of the Lord from His word. And so there are just truths that I want to speak over my kids, whether I feel it or not, whether they want to receive it or not. I'm going to choose to speak God's word over them. And sometimes too, like I think that, I got little kids again, and so we see, I think, twisting of the character of God. Like, so my son, like sometimes he'll get aggressive, and it's not godly aggression. But I want to begin in those moments. I'll just begin to prophesy over him that, hey, like, you're a warrior, son, and God put that spirit in you, and so this is what you're going to do with that spirit as you're older. And just kind of, and that's, I believe that the thing that God put inside of all of us, it's there. And so it's a matter of like, hey, we need to call it out. And we can call that out in our kids, but we can also call that out in spiritual sons. And I would just encourage spiritual fathers, in church, like what a role that we can play to call out the gifts in the people in our community. And as Pastor Dave was saying, like, it's a very, last 150 years where family is only four people, when really, like, church, that's our family and that's our community, and we can call prophetically things out in people. And I think that's our role as fathers.
That's good. That's very good.
Well, look at me being concerned about the time. Last person that would. Uh, I do think, though, it's important that, and Pastor Brett, I want to ask you. We've talked a lot about family, so we're all dads, fathers, family, but there are a lot of younger men that we have spiritual leadership over, we walk with, and I think it's important that we address that. Whether you're a grandfather or a youth, or like looking to get married, you're desperate to get married. Like, in every season of life, what biblically, what does it mean to be a man,
Yeah.
and to be a man of God specifically?
Yeah. That's a great question. I like alliteration. I like, things to start with the same letter because it just helps me remember. And so I think I've boiled it down to 3 P's, if you will. I think to be a biblical man of God, you are a protector, you're a provider, and you're a priest.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the 3 areas, the 3 roles that you would have. And I think it happens in all kinds of ways. When I think about provider, I think about the words of Solomon that talks about a wise man who lays up not just for his children, but for his children's children. Like, that puts a whole nother, man, I shouldn't just be thinking about me. I shouldn't just be thinking about my generation. I should be thinking about my generation, my kids, and then my kids' kids.
Mm-hmm.
What can I pass on? And not just in the natural, but what can I pass on in the spiritual? What can I pass on in the realms of faith? What can I model in my life? The inheritance that we pass is not just our money or our perceived wealth. It is the fullness of who you are is passed down. I think about the father in the parable of the prodigal son. At the very end, when the older brother is mad, he says, everything that I have is yours. And that is significantly true in that moment, because remember, they already divided his estate. So the prodigal son went and took his half and blew it all. So literally everything that the father has is the older son's. That's all that's left in the family. And he says, but your brother went away and we thought he was dead, but he's come back. And so what I think about when I think about that passage in Luke 15 is that the father said, everything that I have is yours. We're all living on my everything that I have is already in your hands. Now this is what you do with it.
Mhm.
This is how you handle it. It was like a father teaching a son moment. Listen, you might be wealthy, you might be faithful, but we're also gracious and we're merciful. And we celebrate when dead things come back to life. And we celebrate when people are correct. He's like, listen, don't have a hard heart. I just sometimes, I do think, we're really quick to jump on some of these people in scripture. It's like, hold on, that was just a dad talking to a son. This is what we do with this is how we are as a family. He was speaking to the family culture as much as he's speaking to anything else. So I think, you're a provider, you're a protector, you're protecting your kids, but you're protecting their future. The best way you can protect their future
Mhm.
is by speaking into them, speaking in life, speaking those words over them, giving them clear direction. My parents were amazing examples. And in our house growing up, if the doors of the church are open, we're there. There's no exception. You didn't get a choice about whether you went to youth or kids ministry or you showed up. There is no choice, because if you live here, this is how this goes. So guess what my house looks like? It doesn't matter
Mhm.
how you feel about it. And when the doors are open, we're there and we're there to serve. That was what was modeled before me by people who didn't do this as a job or didn't do this as a career. This is what it is to be a follower of Jesus. If the doors are open, we're there. They protected me in my future by putting me in the Father's house. And then I think of the word priest
Mhm.
as a dad or as a father, and you are the spiritual leader of your household. Like, it's
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
That's the role that the Lord has placed you in. It's nobody else's job. It's your role. And we've actually, as men, largely deferred to our wives or the women in our
Mhm.
lives to go, you know what, we should go, or you should go to that thing. Unless it's men's breakfast where there's a lot of bacon, it's like we've just deferred to the spiritual practices to somebody else. I wonder what your house might look like if you said, man, I'm a protector and I'm a provider. We can grab onto those, but I'm also a priest and I'm here to lead my home.
Well, I think those apply even when you don't have your family yet. So, like a lot of younger guys, you're looking to get married, you're looking to build a life, build a family. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't protect what comes into your eyes, your ears, your heart now,
Very
you won't
good.
protect it
Very
from your
good.
family.
Very good.
If you don't learn to be a provider when it's only you to provide for it with wisdom, like get a job, go to work, show up every day you're supposed to be there. Like those are the things that like learning it now, like we think, okay, well, when I have a family and I have responsibility, then I'll do it better. Just start now. And then like that priest thing, it's like if you want to lead others, you need to learn to lead yourself.
It's really good.
Like that's the greatest, being able to lead yourself. And so going back to where we started in the beginning, David, a man after God's own heart, people were watching what he did all the time. And one of my favorite stories came from this book, uh, Tale of Three Kings, and it talks about David, Saul, and Absalom. And they asked like one of the army commanders later, like, what was it like to serve under him? And they just said, all we know is we had a leader that like cried a lot, prayed a lot, and they were watching him lead himself before they led them. And that made all the difference of whether or not these men would follow him. And I think, for younger men especially, and you need to learn to lead yourself in all these areas. But older guys, I think sometimes we get into marriage, our wives handle so many things with our kids at home, and we're like, oh, this is kind of nice, I can take a break, I don't have to lead in these areas anymore. But it never stops, or at least it's not supposed to.
We keep repeating the garden scene, don't we? Because the priesthood, the protection, the provision were all in the garden. And what Adam failed at was the priesthood aspect of it.
Well, he's
And
right
so,
there.
yeah, so he failed at that. And that's what keeps getting repeated is we tend to listen to what we're told and we do what we're told. And so without, I'm going to say the word confidence, that and that's a beautiful word. If you go ask the guys that study such things, it would appear that both men and women think that confidence is the defining masculine trait. It's a great human trait, but it's the defining masculine trait. Manly men are confident, measured by both sexes. That's what they think. But the word itself, it's a Latin word. If you break it down, it just means with faith.
Hmm.
So whether you're leading yourself, whether you're leading your children or your marriage, you've got to start from that relationship with the Lord so that there's a belief system that you have, that you practice, that you're consistent with in discipline and marriage and your priesthood and your provision, your protection, that makes all the difference. You're going to make mistakes, but you got a standard you're living by.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I think I would just sort of add as far as, and this applies for everyone. Hey, what does it look like to be those three things? I think everything that God, creates, the enemy wants to counterfeit. So when God calls us to be priests and providers and protectors, and to me those are active words. And so the enemy's trying to get you to be passive when God's calling you to be active. And so in a very practical sense, I would just encourage all men, like, hey, how do I know I'm following God in these things? Um, it's usually the moment where you know that you're supposed to do that thing, and then that voice says, "Don't do it." That's usually the moment that you have that ability and opportunity to act like a man. Whether it's simply, as you said, getting into the Bible, getting your family to church. Like sometimes the most manly thing you can do is get your family to church
On time.
early.
Yeah, yeah. And it
And
was your choice.
yeah. And so that's what I would say is just we go first. And so I don't have to wait for my wife to tell us we're going to church, or for my wife to ask if we're praying for this meal or for our family. Like we're gonna go first. And in our finances, hey, if there's an offering, I'm not asking my wife, are we giving? It's like we're just gonna go first. And that's not to say her opinion doesn't matter. It's just that, hey, God's calling us to go first. And that's kind of what resonates in my mind.
Really good.